Whether you play tactical shooters, MOBAs, or even MMOs, each and every player to ever touch an online video game has complained about the same thing at one point or another. Ping.
Hello?
Dude, it's lagging out!
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't, yeah. Yeah, we can't, I mean, we're done, that's it. You thought Siege was bad.
In certain titles, having a consistent low ping is absolutely crucial.
This has to be lag switch. This is awful!
While in other games, there are certain activities or instances where you might be able to get away with having a slightly higher ping. So in this episode, we want to figure out just how important ping actually is. Is having high ping as bad as that dude who just whiffed his shot makes it out to be? And is having really high ping actually kind of a good thing? Alright, so before we dive into the video, let's see how fast you can like it, slap the subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Just to test out your latency, of course. So, let's start with the easy question. What exactly is ping?
And now, the guy who actually knows.
Hey, whoa! Not yet. I got this, alright? Jeez. It's like they have zero faith in me. I know things. Well, for starters, it's not just some random number that shows up on the side of your scoreboard when you hit tab in Valorant. No, ping is used to measure the latency or amount of time it takes to send and receive a packet of data between two devices, such as your computer and a game's servers. And most importantly, ping is measured in milliseconds. So if you're far away from the server, which will happen if you're, say, queuing with your West Coast friends or farming Freelo on the European CSGO servers, then you'll see that little number beside your name go up. The lower the ping or latency, the faster the information is received. And having a lower ping will give you a smoother and more accurate gameplay experience, which is really important if you're trying to be a sweaty little tryhard.
80 milliseconds on the grand scheme of things doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when it comes to, you know, like winning an aim duel, especially when you're a little better and, like, you know, people are hitting headshots and you're hitting headshots, you know, every millisecond counts.
In online shooters, things like player models, maps, and textures are stored on your PC. But if you're competing against other players online, then only the basics need to be sent back and forth between you and your opponents. This includes things like bullet trajectory and updates to objects on the map, such as damaged buildings or environments. But if you are suffering from high ping, then you might run into some issues. Higher ping means that sending and receiving information will take longer. Bullets might not even register at all. And if the ping is too high, then the information can stop coming through altogether, which will cause severe lag. In extreme cases, you might even disconnect from the server.
Playing with really high ping is also not a walk in the park. It's really annoying. The main things is it's almost like everybody honestly sees you before you see them. A lot of times some games will implement ways so that if you have high ping, it actually hurts you. It might feel like you're lagging essentially. You know, I think we've all been, you know, playing like COD back in the day and you get that connection error plug at the bottom of your screen and everyone stops moving and is running in place, and it's just so frustrating to deal with because, you know, you just want to play the game normally, and it feels like almost as if you ever had one of those dreams where you're running but you're not moving. Yeah, it's exactly like that playing with high ping.
In esports, having low latency is essential. If you're playing a game competitively, then you need it to run as smoothly as possible without any hiccups. And this is why every major event is played on LAN. Because when every player is playing at sub 1 millisecond ping, then nobody has any excuses. If you miss your shot, you kind of just have to own up to it. It is quite simply the most competitive way to play.
You never question yourself on LAN. It's either did I miss or did I hit? You know what I mean? It's essentially just that. You're either hitting the headshot or hitting all your bullets or you're not. There's never a question like, oh, like I feel like I shot before him, or I feel like I reacted faster, but I ended up losing. So I just think LAN is just always going to be better, but obviously you just can't play on a LAN environment regularly.
So, like Fox just said, not everyone has access to LAN servers each and every day. And when you're playing from home, the physical distance between you and the game server is a huge factor when it comes to determining your ping. Hell, I still can't get lower than 40 ping on Valorant because there just aren't any servers near Toronto, let alone in Canada at all. Now, there are factors other than your ping to and from the server, and this is where we'll get into tick rates. But trust, you don't want to hear me complain about Valve's shitty 64 tick servers all day. So here is Colten to help me out.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about. Presented by AMD.
You're right. I don't want to listen to you complain about Valve servers. But thankfully, we don't have to. AMD have partnered with us once again to bring you the most important segment on Cracked. Now, players tend to associate a game tick with a measure of time, but it actually describes a process with 3 very important steps. First, a game server will collect incoming player data and events, such as the location of a player and bullet trajectory. Then the server will perform calculations based on that data, and finally send the newly calculated information back to the players. This ensures that all players are seeing the same thing, or as close to it as possible. And once the server has done these 3 things, it has completed a single tick. A tick rate refers to a server's number of ticks per second, or more importantly for gamers, the amount of times per second that you're getting new information from that server. Riot's League of Legends servers have a tick rate of 30, which might come as a surprise to many of you. Players have noticed that the game's relatively low tick rate causes certain abilities to become somewhat unpredictable, even at the highest level.
I feel like a lot of issues with League involve the tick rate of like how the game updates. It's like every quarter second. Yeah. And so it'll be really inconsistent with like LeBlanc and Nocturne chain type abilities where it's almost RNG if you get out of it or not, based on like when the server ticks.
That would make sense.
I've noticed that with Morg as well.
Those.
It's like sometimes you flash out of the Morg ulti and it tethers onto you because it like ticked at the wrong time for you.
One of the most common scenarios you'll encounter in League of Legends is getting hit by an ability after you've already recalled. Since the servers only send out updates 30 times per second, there are times where you're already back in base, but you still get hit by an ability that your opponent sent out just as you were recalling. This is because your opponent's information was sent before the recall went through, but you didn't receive that information until your recall animation had already finished. Ping has actually been a constant issue for high elo players in North America since Riot moved their server from Portland to Chicago. And from the start, some of them have been pretty vocal about their concerns. Pro players in NA have been forced to play on high ping for years now, and after constantly getting smacked by teams on the international stage, a fix might finally be on the way. Riot recently announced that a new server named Champions Queue will allow NA pros to compete against each other with much lower latency, something that's actually already been in place in other regions. Anyways, back to tick rates. Competitive shooters tend to need much higher tick rate servers. Valve's CSGO servers, for instance, run at 64 ticks per second, and that's pretty solid. But with high refresh rate monitors becoming more and more prevalent, and players running their game well over 200 frames per second, some games might still feel somewhat choppy even on 64 tick rate. Say you picked up a fancy new 144Hz monitor and your PC is pumping out 144 or more frames per second, but you're only receiving updates from the game's server 64 times per second. You might run into some minor desync issues where the simulation happening on your PC, and ultimately what you're seeing, begins to drift away from what's actually happening on the server before that next update gets pushed out. Luckily, Counter-Strike services like ESEA and Faceit have 128 tick servers to help combat this issue. And now with new games like Valorant becoming increasingly popular, 128 tick servers are the gold standard. Valorant devs have even managed to make the client-side simulation match the server-side tick rate, regardless of what FPS you're getting.
And that was the guy who actually knows what he's talking about. Presented by AMD.
A lot of you Valorant kiddies can count yourselves lucky that you will never know the struggle of playing on 64 tick MM servers. And trust me, once you go 128, you literally cannot go back. The difference is night and day. Not to mention the fact that you have to memorize different smokes for each tick rate. After playing on good, crispy modern servers, anything else just feels sluggish and gross. It's kind of similar to the feeling you get when you play on a high refresh rate monitor and then go back to 60 Hz. It's a noticeable difference, and once you get used to those crispy, responsive clicks, you're not going to want to go back. And although they're still not perfect, 128 tick servers are pretty much the best thing that us normies are going to get.
So Valorant has great head reg. Like even, like sometimes it'll like feel BS because it's not perfect. It's not 1000 tick rate or something. There's gonna be every now and then it's gonna feel weird. It's not gonna feel like perfect, but it feels pretty close to perfect. Even so much so that like my CS:GO friends come over and they'll be like, "Wow, like Valorant has so much better hit reg," and I don't think it's even the hit reg. I think it's just the tick rate at that point. I think Valorant just has a lot better servers than Valve's official ones.
But with the release of Valorant, Riot also set out to eliminate something that has plagued the tactical shooter genre for many years.
So one thing that kind of rings really clear to us on Valorant and to our designers is our philosophy on competitive integrity. So I guess in essence, right, competitive integrity is that for every single game you play, whether you win or you lose, you are in control of the outcome. Through no fault of the other 9 players or the game server, they will not hinder your experience.
Think of all the times you've held an angle in any shooter and some fucking kid Ferrari peeks you around a corner and you get dumpstered before you can even react. That shit sucks. And what I am describing is referred to as Peeker's Advantage. Peeker's Advantage has existed for as long as people have been shooting each other online. And eliminating the issue is just not easy for developers, because the fact is, it is quite literally impossible for everyone to have the exact same ping. When there's a large discrepancy in ping between 2 players, then it's a no-brainer that one of them will likely see the other first. And despite Riot's best efforts, Peeker's Advantage remains a thing in Valorant, just like it remains a thing in every other online shooter. But once again, the reason is because they're playing online, and depending on your ping, you might even have to change your playstyle.
Playing on high ping is obviously really annoying. I mean, it's the same with like CS:GO, but you have incredible Peeker's Advantage, but at the same time, holding angles is very, very difficult on high ping. But it's the same, like if you're playing on high ping against other people, they also are going to struggle to hold angles against you, and you're gonna have a Peeker's Advantage against them.
Opping in Counter-Strike, for instance, is notoriously a big no-no on high ping, since the weapon is quite literally designed to hold angles. I'm assuming the same is true of Valorant, since the operator is even less mobile than the sniper on which it was based. So as you've assuredly gathered by now, a LAN environment is basically the only place where you can accurately see player movements as each competitor presses their inputs. And this is because everyone has the exact same sub 1 millisecond ping that we all dream of. But the problem nowadays is that some not so nice players like to use their high ping to their advantage. And that is called ping abuse. Some players intentionally queue on distant servers in order to jack their ping up and create their own Peeker's Advantage. And let me tell you, playing against them kinda sucks.
Personally, I've actually played against a lot of people that ping abuse. Right now, I'm playing against this one guy in Valorant almost every day who's from Russia, and he's playing in North American servers, and it's just, if he swings you, he pretty much has a whole, 2 seconds of an advantage of seeing you before you see him. You're pretty much getting, shot before you even see anybody on your screen.
Now, unfortunately, these cowards aren't just doing this in Valorant. You can encounter ping abusers in pretty much any online game. And until we get to a point where everyone has a sub 1 millisecond ping, or close to it, then Peeker's Advantage is to be expected. So, does ping actually matter? Of course it does. Does it matter as much as the dude bottom fragging on Jet with 40 ping says it does? Probably not. But ping always has and always will have a huge influence on how we play the games we love.
And although you hear Counter-Strike stands, like Dimitri complaining about Peeker's advantage all the time, in almost every situation, playing on high ping just isn't a viable option. Sure, you might be able to hit some nice shots when you swing a corner and headshot an unsuspecting enemy, but it's not a consistent recipe for success. In the long run, playing on high ping is only going to hurt your win rate.
Well, who knows? Hopefully one day every player will be able to play without having to worry about latency. But until that day comes, and until every game has the infrastructure to provide ultra-low latency, then ping absolutely matters. Aren't any servers near Toronto, let alone in Canada at all. I just realized I almost said Toronto. Like, what the f***? Like, my tendency to enunciate every word in my shoots almost caused me to say Toronto, which is just cursed. Absolutely cursed. Jesus. Like, Toronto. Tell me you're not from Toronto without telling me you're not from Toronto. Toronto is the only acceptable way to enunciate that word.